The Ukrainian authorities, the Office of the Prosecutor General and other institutions have launched an investigation now, whilst the full-scale invasion is still ongoing.
It is difficult to determine the exact number of children deported from Ukraine to Russia because the Russian Federation limits access towards the so-called evacuation and also transfer under other pretexts.
Hello and welcome to Ukraine in Flames, a special project by Ukraine Media Center and NGO Euro-Atlantic Course, and I'm your host, Myroslava Yaremkiv. Since the start of full-scale Russian invasion, around 15,000 people are considered missing officially, 3,500 of which are military servicemen. Of course, the unofficial count is much higher. We don't know whether these people are in captivity, deported from occupied territories, or were killed by Russians. If you want to learn more about this subject, please continue watching this video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our videos in the future. We're going to start with Matthew Holliday, head of ICMP European programs. ICMP is the International Commission on Missing Persons, whose work is exclusively based on the issue of missing persons. Matthew will talk about specificity of Ukrainian case and their close collaboration with Ukrainian official authorities. During his speech, you will find QR code in the bottom of the video, and it will lead you to ICMP Online Inquiry Center, where you can submit missing persons report by providing details such as name, date of birth, and place where the missing person was last seen. If you know somebody who will find this link helpful, please share it with them, as it can assist in locating missing people.
I think what's interesting about the Ukrainian case in terms of the search for the missing is that it's unique in the sense that the Ukrainian authorities, the Office of the Prosecutor General and other institutions have launched an investigation now, whilst the full-scale invasion is still ongoing. Elsewhere in the world, we've only seen serious attempts to account for the missing after the conflict or after the war has finished. Take Bosnia, for example, or Kosovo or elsewhere. So I think Ukraine is a unique case. It's unprecedented in terms of what the Ukrainian authorities are trying to achieve. And that raises a whole load of challenges as well, of course. ICMP has received only a small number of reports of missing persons directly from family members that have a missing relative. I think it's around 300 now. Obviously, this is a tiny part of the total number of missing. I mean, the fact is that it's very difficult to estimate or to gauge how many missing there are at this particular point in time. The figure that has been quoted often and recently is that of the Office of the Prosecutor General, who in mid-September stated there were around 15,000 missing persons cases for which there was no information as to their whereabouts. So, I mean, this is all we have to go on. But I think it's safe to say that this 15,000 is perhaps at the lower end of the scale, and the number of missing is certainly higher, especially when you take into consideration potentially the number of persons killed, buried in Mariupol, which far exceeds that number alone. ICMP was invited to assist Ukraine earlier this year after an exchange of notes with the Office of the Prosecutor General to provide urgent assistance to Ukraine. At this point in time, we're still in the final phases of concluding our cooperation agreement with the Ukrainian authorities. And once signed and ratified, this will enable ICMP to roll out its full program and full support to the National Police, to the Office of the Commissioner for Missing Persons in specific circumstances, to the Office of the Prosecutor General, and to other institutions that are involved in the search in Ukraine. This will include, once the cooperation agreement is signed, the launch of a very large outreach campaign, the purpose of which is to encourage families of the missing to report their missing to the ICMP. They can even do that now via ICMP's online inquiry center. That is oic.icmp.int. And any information provided by the families to ICMP is stored in confidence and securely, and will be used solely for the purposes of investigating those cases and hopefully to locate and to identify the missing.
One of the most most brutal genocidal acts that Russia commits on the Ukrainian territories is kidnapping, forcibly displacing, and then integrating Ukrainian children into Russian social-cultural and military system. Kateryna Rashevska, legal expert at the Regional Center for Human Rights, will tell us more on how, where, and why Russia is deporting thousands of Ukrainian kids.
Hello, my name is Kateryna Rashevska. I'm a legal expert at the Regional Center for Human Rights. And today, I would like to highlight maybe the most terrible issue caused by disappearances. These are large-scale and systematic deportations of Ukrainian children to the territory of the Russian Federation and their forced transfer to Russian families. It is difficult to determine the exact number of children deported from Ukraine to Russia because the Russian Federation limits access to both the so-called evacuation and also transfer under other pretexts, for example, rest in a camp or receiving medical services. We pretend that this number varies between 300,000–700,000 Ukrainian children, with parents or without them. When we are talking about unaccompanied children, these are orphans, children deprived of parental care, and also children which parents were killed or didn't pass the so-called filtration process. It is known about at least 57 regions of the Russian Federation where Ukrainian children were deported. In 16 of them, they were forcibly transferred to Russian families for foster care or adoption. The geography of these areas varies, from Sakhalin to Astrakhan, from Novosibirsk to Dagestan and Murmansk. From the statements of the Russian officials, we may conclude that these children firstly are placed to temporary accommodation centers, and then to special boarding institutions, orphanages, family-type homes, but finally to Russian families. The conditions where these children reside are very different, but there is the same thing. These children are under the constant supervision of the Ministry of Defense or Special Forces of the Russian Federation, which limit the leakage of information. To describe what happens to children in Russia: Russification and militarization. For example, if you like to sing the Ukrainian folk song, you will be inevitably transferred to the classes of the Russian folk songs. And if you like the cars, you will be learned to repair the Russian tank. And you will be inevitably taught to sing the Russian anthem and to love the Russian president, because the Russian Federation is trying to turn our Ukrainian children into enemies of their nation by ravaging our national group and strengthening its own. The Russian Federation would like to use the young Ukrainian generation in different roles in future hostilities. During the Second World War, the Nazis kidnapped children from occupied territories and transferred them to families of the SS officials to be Germanized. These children were to become the new elite. They were in excellent conditions and they were loved. However, such actions, which were indeed salvation for these children from extermination, were later recognized as genocide by competent institutions. Actions do not meet the child's best interest, which was highlighted by the Office of the United Nations Human Rights Commissioner and UNICEF. The Russian Federation, contrary to the requirements of the international humanitarian law, doesn't provide the information on deported Ukrainian children. Moreover, together with Ukrainian children, the Russian military stolen also the register with their personal data. In addition, the illegal parents, new parents of these children, during the process of their adoption, can change their first and last names, date of birth, place of birth, and other personal information. Such actions aggravate situation with identification of Ukrainian children deported to Russia. To date, approximately 14,000 Ukrainian children were identified, but only 125 children have been returned home. The Russian Federation refuses to cooperate with Ukrainian government and international independent organizations in order to develop a single legal mechanism to return these children, calling them their own Russian kids.
You've been watching the special project by Ukraine Media Center and Euro-Atlantic course dedicated to the Russian-Ukrainian war, Ukraine in Flames. In the description under this video, you can find information on how you can help Ukraine fight Russian aggression. If you find our work useful, please like and share this video. Slava Ukraini!